Hey all you Lenyendecker fans, I'm sure you've seen all of these at one time or another, but no matter how many times I see them, they are always eye candy for me. So, what am I doing here today? Well, I think it's called a master study, not to be confused with an art study. Lenyendecker did art studies. Before he began his final painting, he would do a quick painting, or parts of a painting, to give him a feel for the direction he wanted to go, testing colors, composition, poses and so on. So, from my understanding of it, a master study is basically when a person does a copy or reproduction of a drawing or painting done by, not to put too fine a point on it, a dead guy. Usually that would be a famous dead artist, in this case, J.C. Lenyendecker, and to do it so it's difficult to tell which is which, or at least, as close as one can get. Hopefully anyway. So let's get started. By the way, I hope you have been paying attention to these illustrations as they have been passing by, because at the end of this video, we're having a little game. It's something you may have missed about them. Let's see who is the best detective out there. Now, let's be fair, no one living in a second floor flat at 21 Baker Street is allowed to play, and that includes Dr. Watson too. The Celtic influence during the golden age of illustration was not confined to Europe. In January of 1907, Theodore Roosevelt wrote an article entitled The Ancient Irish Sagas for the Century magazine, which featured two illustrations by J.C. Lenyendecker. The first of these illustrations is Queen Mauve, the proud warrior queen of Connaught. In this painting, Lenyendecker captures the cool confidence of this inimitable woman in the bored expression on her face. All of the power and strength of the Celtic warrior is evident in her posture, and her costume and weaponry are accurate renderings of the Celtic design. The lure of the rich legends of Ireland to both writers and illustrators is not surprising. Depictions of these tales have evolved from a long history of vivid imagination and evocative design, a history that continues to this day. Here are a few excerpts from Roosevelt's article, so we may get a little better feel of her and for her life and times. Queen Mauve was a real person, not a made-up mythical fairy tale queen. Although it has been said she did delve into sorcery living as she did during the Dark Ages, what makes Queen Mauve of Connaught an even more remarkable and impressive figure is that she was widely hailed as being one of the strongest leaders at the time. This was despite the fact that during this period, Cuchulainn, the greatest of all Irish warriors, was around and in full force. She was known as the Irish goddess of intoxication as she was famous for her beauty and sexual prowess, which was incredibly advantageous for her. Mauve was born as one of the many daughters of RG Depew, the High King of Ireland. When she became a woman, her father married her off to the King of Ulster, Conchobar mac Nessa. Mauve, however, was unhappy with this marriage, and when she left King Conchobar, her father then offered him Mauve's sister Ethne to marry instead. When Ethne fell pregnant by Conchobar, Mauve was consumed by anger and jealousy, and in a terrible rage, she drowned her pregnant sister. The baby, however, miraculously survived the ordeal. With her sister Ethne gone, Mauve then married a warrior called Ailill as she took over the province of Connaught, which would have been her sister's. It was said that Ailill was only granted the honor of marrying Mauve because he was known to have a unique trait of feeding no jealously. This benefited Mauve considering her promiscuous lifestyle, as she refused to let any king rule at Tara without first making love to her first. She quickly became known as the goddess of sovereignty and territory as well as lust because of these actions. The famous cattle raid of Cooley. One evening, Mauve and King Ailill were trying to decide who was the superior one. So, they began to count out their belongings. The only difference between them was that Ailill possessed a majestic, magnificent white-horned bull, whereas Mauve did not. Mauve immediately sent messengers to the four corners of Ireland in search of a bull as perfect as Ailill's. The search revealed that there was only one other bull that could rival Ailill's, the brown bull of Cooley, which was owned by Dara of Cooley. Mauve offered gold and lands to him in exchange for the bull. Dara was initially going to accept the offer until he heard one of Mauve's drunken messengers boasting that if Dara didn't sell the bull, Mauve would take it by force anyway. This angered Dara, and he refused to sell the bull to Mauve. True to form, Mauve was outraged by this and assembled a huge army of her allies from all over Ireland to invade Ulster and take the bull by force. This began the famous Battle of VIOEO, otherwise known as the Cattle Raid of Cooley, coming up against Cuchulainn. Between Mauve and the entire province of Ulster, Mauve sent her champions to fight him in single combat, but he dispatched each one of them with ease, one of which was even his foster brother Ferdia. Upon seeing this, many of Mauve's followers began to turn on her by repenting and claiming that she was an evil and vengeful woman. On the eve of the final battle between the two armies, the brown bull of Cooley was smuggled into Connaught, where it entered the same pasture as Ailill's white bull. Upon seeing each other, both bulls fought and gored each other to death, which symbolized the wasteful and pointless conflict that the Queen of Connaught had caused between Connaught and Ulster. Years later, after the cattle raid of Cooley, Mauve invaded Ulster once again to take vengeance on Cuchulainn. Mauve ultimately got her revenge as Cuchulainn fell in battle. It was short-lived, however, as her past came back to haunt her in the form of her murdered sister's son, who was said to have killed her with a slingshot bearing a piece of cheese. The legacy of Queen Mauve of Connaught remains strong today, as she is known for both positives and negatives. For example, being an Irish goddess who was independent, strong, lustful, vengeful, beautiful and ruthless all at the same time. Queen Mauve is said to be buried upright in the cairn at the summit of Knockneria, County Sligo. She has her spear in hand, ready for her enemies in Ulster. From Roosevelt's description we can see that Mauve was naturally bold in personality, to be sure. She was also naturally beautiful, and knew it, and without need for makeup or other artificial aids in that regard, she was an all-natural rustic beauty. When was Queen Mauve alive? It's believed that it would have been around 50 BCE. The stories of Mauve lie in most of the early literature of Ireland. So, was Mauve a barbarian? Most certainly. A pagan? Yes again. Warlike? Illiterate? Yes to all of these. This was Ireland, not Britain, with its established Roman Christian traditions. Ireland would not take up Christianity until Patrick came back from abroad. Saint Patrick. After the Romans left, Britain fell back into its old ways, anarchy and chaos reigned big time, but that was after Queen Mauve's time. Let me tell you about a few tools and techniques I use for painting in Photoshop. I don't use any special brushes other than the ones that come with Photoshop. The first two, of course, the airbrush and the hard-edged brush next to it, numbers 39 and 123, and then I use the wide bristle brushes, number 87, 289, and others like them, 46.17 or 30, when I want to make a brush stroke that looks like, well, brush strokes, and that's pretty much it. A few others, I'm not that particular. I use both the burn and dodge tools quite a lot. Watch the burn tool, however, it tends to desaturate colors as it darkens them, but you can bring back the intensity with the sponge tool after using the burn tool. I use the smudge tool set on its lower settings. I like it to feather off when I use it, not smudge away forever. The painting modes, the normal mode of course, I find the darken only mode extremely effective, in that it does something not possible with real paint. Painting a light color next to an adjacent dark color, the lighter color won't cover over a darker one when overlapping it. Oh, I suppose a very thin tint over a darker color does a similar thing in real paints. But, in the darken-only mode it does it like a tent, only on steroids. It really works well. The color mode also does something unique in computer art. Complete color changes without changing any already established values, very useful. The multiply mode is a little like using felt-tipped markers, they darken the more times you paint over them, but I don't use that mode that often. I also use some filters over selected areas after they have been painted sometimes to give them an added look. I use the pixelate crystallize filter quite a lot, usually at a low level of strength, like level 3 or 4. I have most of the filters memorized, so when something comes up where I feel an area needs something a little extra, I know where to get that extra thing. Channels, I don't use them that often, but you will see later in this painting I did make use of them and I explain it quite thoroughly. To isolate local colors, I sometimes use hard-edged alpha channels. I use them as color-coded channels, this so I may bring them out easily as hard-edged selections with the Magic Wand tool, otherwise I use saved paths for making my hard-edged, isolating selections. The layers are of course important, obvious reasons. Also, using a Wacom tablet has its advantages of course too, but you can paint with a mouse. I do it all the time. So, what type of technique do I use? What kind of a technique is this anyway? Who is to say, really? A Photoshop technique? I guess so, but just one of many. It is supposed to look like oils, that's what Lenyendecker used. But of course, it's apples and oranges, the comparison cannot be made actually, when considering technique. It's a totally different paradigm, sort of like trying to compare a quartz digital watch and a clock's work that runs on springs and gears. They both tell you exactly what time it is, but in a completely different way. Just keep this in mind when trying to understand channels. All of the channels, the RGB and or any output channel you may create are exactly congruent. That is to say, they are large matrices of pixels lined up one on top of the others, just like the layers are. Pixels within these matrices may reside at any level of a grayscale spectrum, 0 or black, up to 256, or white. The three RGB, red, green, and blue channels, the image channels, use them to represent the 256 levels of luminosity or brightness of light. from 0, or black, to 256. If all three channels are at level 256, that's white light. When a pixel resides at a lower level than 256, and the three RGB channels vary in values of gray for that pixel, those grayscale levels are multiplied together to express a certain hue value, a color for that pixel. So, it follows then, when multiplying 256 to the third power, this gives you the 16.7 million potential colors and values available in Photoshop. Which is plenty. That number is about the limit the human eye can detect between colors anyway. I guess that's why they stopped there. 16.7 million colors when judged at first sight may seem a bit excessive, but remember, there are only 256 different hues, all the rest are variations in value. Thinking in the additive colors of light can be a bit confusing when most of our lives as artists we've thought about colors as pigments, or subtractive color. When sunlight, white light, strikes say, red paint, the red pigment absorbs all of the other colors of light, 16 million plus, they are subtracted away, so you only see the red light that is being reflected. So, where do all of the other colors go? Well, they are turned into heat. Photons, although very small and only a small amount that may be coming from your overhead lamp, they do still possess mass, so they tend to get very angry when something tries to block or attenuate them on their way traveling over to the next galaxy. Pigments, how dare you? Well, I guess the Earth is in the way too. Your canvas becomes a little bit warmer. Ever try to touch a dark or black car hood on a bright summer day? Ouch, your canvas and paints get a little bit hotter, but not so that you would notice. However, the other use for channels, alpha channels, you create them to block, or partially block, allowing an effect to get through these invisible masks. How my cloud picture was influenced was to brush over the face area with a large airbrush tipped burn tool. I may have used the dodge tool some as well. Similar then, to doing a charcoal rubbing over a gravestone to create an image. When creating these masks, the work is done in the opened visualization display for the channel. So, when using channels like this, they are basically stored selections. They may be either hard-edged or soft, or a combination of both. Hard-edged are good for use as open stencils. Soft-edged, well, they can be used for lots of things, like my scanned-in face. You have 256 grayscale levels to play with in any way you wish. Soft airbrush transitions. Scan in an image or texture, run a canvas or wood texture selection over your entire painting. Now every stroke you make will look like you've been painting on a real wood or canvas substrate, etc. Also, Photoshop itself uses channels to do many of its turnkey functions. For instance, when running some filters, there are perhaps several steps of channel operations needed, so they are simply automatically done rather than having to do them manually. Got the picture? Now, go have some fun with channels. skipping and repeating things on a layer, like highlights, very handy. Found all these posted on the internet. Seems Mauve is a popular figure to paint these days, and there were a lot more than just these. Well, nobody really knows what she looked like, not even Lenyendecker. So, guess she's fair game. I do believe she was blonde, however. Oh look, here's another Lenyendecker copy. Somebody beat me to doing it first. Oh well, better luck next time for me. The smoke you see here is just a quick stand-in for it. Later, I will replace it with the final smoke for the painting. Making use of the darken-only mode here quite a lot. Can paint a lighter shade over the top of a darker one, but it doesn't affect it. Of course you can switch back and forth as often as you like, even while using the same brush. You can switch to any mode that way too. Right here is the key to how the hair was done. Over the local color, which I changed to be darker, I paint vaguely the Lenyendecker hair shapes. I don't try to follow him exactly, and just keeping the values similar. And then on an upper layer I'm picking out a few hair strands and painting them with highly spread out bristled brushes like 21, 31, 183, and others. I'm making long and short sweeps, trying to follow Lenyendecker, but doing my own thing as well. The sweeps run beyond where I want them to feather off, so I then use a mid-sized airbrush-tipped eraser tool to softly end them. In a few places I may even use single hair sweeps to further accent or correct the shapes created. You may have noticed by now that this Lenyendecker painting is a bit rougher than others you may have seen. It's quite gritty. I don't believe he painted it that way though. Most likely it doesn't exist anymore and all that is left is this bad print. Too bad, but at least we still have it. In my reproduction efforts I have been trying to clean it up some. Don't know how successful I have been, but I'm trying anyway to fix it. The magic wand tool easily captures the smoke, just a touch on the green areas, and you have it. I've done this for certain selections too, throughout the painting, but I wanted the smoke to be just a bit feathered on all of its outer edges, so, after bringing up its hard-edged isolating selection, I then went to the selection menu and chose Select, Modify, Feather, and set it to about 5 pixels, in this case, and the smoke takes on that feathering amount at its edges. Right here at this point, notice how I'm painting the white inside the smoke oval shape, the hole in the smoke. I'm painting the white on the layer below it. I do this whenever I see an advantage of doing it this way. The layer on top captures what goes under it, while catching whatever soft or feather brush strokes I may have left on the layer above. Later when I combine the layers you will never know I actually painted the top layer first, not what's under it. This technique is a good use for having layers. I did the same thing just a little earlier when starting the top of her hair. I painted that very dark shadow under the very light swish of light yellow highlight. It was painted first. I find this as a very handy thing to do, and having the layers to do it with. So, why did I use the pixelated crystallize filter over this hair layer? The hair seemed way too smooth, so I ran the filter to give the hair a look more like the rest of the painting. Alright, now it's time for a little demonstration. I'll be demonstrating how I made the yellowish hair strands. This will happen on that small bit of hair on the right side of her face. Be watching for 5 white light strobes. After the first strobe, the first thing you will see is me painting over top of the hair's local color, variations in color and tone, defining some deep shadow strokes and in lighter areas. I also run the crystallize filter for no good reason. And lastly, several lighter yellow strokes. Next, get ready for the second white strobe. You will first see as I draw a path with the pen tool, and then a bristle brush will follow soon after. It will stroke so fast that you will not actually see the stroke happen. As soon as that stroke is enlarged, there will come a third white strobe. This is when everything gets really slowed down, so that you may see me softly cutting off the 2 ends of that stroke. Remember, I am using a mid-sized airbrush tipped eraser tool. I can't do this because the yellow hair strands are on a separate layer above the main painting. After the 4th white strobe, you will see a single strand of hair already stroked. Again, you will see me using the soft edge eraser tool, cutting the 2 ends of it off. And lastly, the 5th white strobe. Here I'm just using an airbrush tip dodge tool to highlight or brighten certain parts of the strands. to give them a little three-dimensional height, or, maybe better to say, to give them some undulating depths and heights, curving them up and down, like a wave. So, that's how the hair strands were done. Right here I'm painting the reddish pink, but in the darken only mode, I can paint over the darker brown, but the brown is not covered over. In other words, no need for blending into it. But here I need to pink up the bottom of her thumb, so I switched the mode to the color mode that colorizes those brownish hues to more red pinkish, but leaves the values alone. And if I had wanted it to be still pinker and slightly lighter, then I could have switched to the normal painting mode. This is all done on the fly. I haven't changed the color on my brush, nor have I changed brushes, but I had 3 choices on the fly by just switching between modes. If you can get good at things like this, the work can go faster. My token leaf figured watching me do all the leaves would be a bit tedious, somewhat like watching grass grow, so here is my token leaf. came across this painting in Leyendecker's archives, which I highly suspect is the second work for the Roosevelt article in Century magazine. Oh yes, I see now, this is Cuchulainn, famous Irish warrior and supposed demigod at age 17. He was actually fighting for the other side from Queen Mauve during the Great Cattle Raid. You can tell by his weapons and armor that he is of Celtic times and that his chariot is of the Roman type, the Roman imperial occupation of the British Isles having ended some several decades earlier. At the age of 17 he defends Ulster single-handedly against the armies of Queen Mauve of Connacht in the cattle raid of Cooley. He is known for his terrifying battle frenzy in which he becomes an unrecognizable monster who knows neither friend nor foe. He fights from his chariot, driven by his loyal charioteer Larg, and drawn by his horses. I would not relish meeting up with the likes of him, in a dark alley, he being perhaps a juvenile delinquent with a very long spear. No, that would not be good, not good at all. The long sword, a popular weapon for Mauve's time, and for centuries before and after that, I painted the sword rusting a bit on its sharp edges. This sword is not made of steel, it is the Iron Age. Steel is within the Iron Age, but iron, while still a prime ingredient, it is not real steel. Chrome steel, or better stainless steel, was not invented yet. Mauve, you should sanction your men for not cleaning their weapons properly. The first Celtic long swords were cast in bronze, and then sharpened. The design was probably etched on the surface with acid of some type. I don't know if Mauve was that musically inclined, but I'm sure she had numerous artists willing to perform for her, and her entourage. A Celtic violin, better known as a fiddle in those days, looking a little different too, but basically the same thing, 4 strings made of catgut, and a bow. I wonder if perhaps those 2 balls in question may have played a tasty part in this woodland feast I've added here for her and her royal courtesans. Perhaps they reserve 2 places on that shish kebab. Do you like your steaks rare or well done? Alright, it's time for our game. Something you may have missed about these illustrations, and one in particular. The thing of it is, one of them is an imposter, yes, one of them has been stolen and a copy has been substituted to pass as the original. So, it is your job to figure out which one it is. There are blaring differences and some subtle ones. If you choose to look them all up online, I'm sure all of you will quickly figure it out. By the way, don't try figuring it out by comparing their backgrounds, because all of the backgrounds have been replaced. Of course, the brush strokes are not the same. Yes, I am the thief and also the one who painted the copy. Oh yes, and what will you win if you are the first one to get the right answer? Well, you will get the admiration from all of the rest of us. The painting in question is also a speed painting and I will be posting it probably in a short while, so that's when you will know who is the winner. I hope you enjoy watching my master studies and speed paintings. I have several more in the works at this time, so stop back in from time to time to see what's happening over here.